Okay, we'll see how this goes with the generators running in the background and a little bit of wind, so we'll just see how it goes. We are taking this apart with the primary purpose of not losing any bolts and replacing a set of mains and converting to narrow edger. Say my toolbox is about 10 feet away, so I have to walk over to get that. Besides running the camera on battery, I'm running a couple of battery chargers, a 24 volt on the up and down motor lift and a 12 volt on the engine battery, just because I figure if I got to run the generator to run the camera, I might as well charge the batteries. What do you know, a blade? I should know that by now. I should know that by now. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because the main belts are smoked, and I have absolutely no tension on the engine for compression to hold this thing still. So I gotta come up with something. I need a bigger hammer. I'm going to pause this. Okay, bigger hammer. That's an awful lot of pounds. There. Yeah, you need to come up with a way of supporting it to get enough force to get this nut off from here. And oh, by the way, because of all the rain and everything, this thing is covered in never sees, because if you don't, it ain't gonna come off without a tremendous amount more force. The outer collar. Ah, yes. And I need a second 7/16. They get filled up with sawdust, so they come off hard. But the theory of making it go in that direction is that the nut comes off. In theory, you don't lose the bolt. in theory. Now I had a bolt sitting here and I beat on this thing and it's flown the coop. Something about vibration does that. You guys tell me where it went, other than it went downhill. I'm sure it went downhill, wherever that downhill was. Aha! Why didn't you tell me that? Anyway, put it over here on the log, it vibrates less. Now I gotta loosen up the inside one. That swings out of the way. Take that out of the way. And then this is a different blade. Possibly. I remember putting those on there. Anyway. Not necessarily been doing all the work, but oh, big round heavy thing. Inside collar. Put that over there. Now you can see here they got an extension piece here. You've got an extension piece here. Got an extension piece here, an extension piece here, and that one's broken off, but there should be an extension piece there because things happen. I'll leave it at that. If you run the mill for 30, 40, 50 years, you'll understand that things happen too. Let's see. This needs to be removed because we are going to convert to narrow configuration. I need to remove this from the expansion piece and transfer it into here. And this is obviously not 9/16, but 7/16. Kind of like a reoccurring theme on this thing. 9/16, half inch, 7/16. A few others thrown in for good measure. An occasional 3/4. An occasional one bigger than 3/4 down in here. So take that off. That goes to that, but it'll go back there. Now what I'm going to do is loosen all of these first. Actually, this needs to be removed because it gets transferred into here to be the outside blade support. Still a little tight. Then this will become the outside bolt. Then where'd that one go? not that one. Keeping track of your nuts and bolts will drive you bonkers. I'll just tell you that right now. It will drive you bonkers. It must have bounced onto the ground as well. Gosh. Anyway, I can stand around here pondering it all day, or I can keep at it. Anybody that's converting over to wide edger, you take a look at this, and everybody's always, how in the world do you put this bracket on? But the key is to get this bracket that goes with this moving guard at the same height that it is back here. So when you install this, the collar, it will slide around inside the moving guard. Never sees does wonders. About half of this mill's life it's been ran in narrow edger, and about half of its life it's been ran in wide edger. So probably somewhere around 300 hours on this mill. Hour gauge quit working at about 230 hours. And if I knew where that extra bolt was, I would stick it in this plate to keep track of it until the next time the wide edger is put on, but I'm still looking for it, and it's a little teeny tiny bolt. Now, this gonna pause this and go look for something else. Okay, next step. Unfortunately, I have to crank the generators up for this part. That compressor hits, they'll stall if I don't have them revved up. I don't use enough air to make it run. There's always that chance too. And I'll reinstall these. They will stay with this extension piece until it goes back on the mill. Pretty ugly because it's going to slop out of place, but that's what it does. Now I'm going to hit this to recharge the compressor. Stays off because that's an extension part, and that card will go back on here, but I don't want to do that right now. Hopefully this thing gets charged up here pretty quick. Okay, that's better. Oh no, those are half-inch. That's not good. Why does that not have it? Alright. Give this a go. See what I can blow up this time. Hey, it turns. Funny how never sees works like that. These will now be spare bolts because that bracket is busted and will never be used again. Yeah, it busted. On too. So those become spares. It's a sequence of events. You take this apart, you take that apart, and you put something back together and you realize you need to do something else first, so you have to take that back apart and do the other thing first, and then put the other one back on that you've already put on and taken off, and now you put it back on again. Sequence of events. This part here, or that, gets relocated to here when you convert from the 19.5 to the 11.5 edger, or at least in theory you're supposed to. Not that everybody does it. Also, if you have a track shoe, there's a section chunk of the track shoe that when you go to wide edger, you need to remove that, because if you don't, you're going to stick your saw teeth into a couple of hardened bolts, and your teeth on your bottom edger are going to have a bad day. And this is another sequence of events. You have to run that down in order to get this bolt out from underneath this flat bar here. So I can take this one out. That one comes out. Well, I had that never seized up just fine and dandy. And then after I get the blade off, I will transfer these into this position and reattach this. Needless to say, I'm starting to get nuts and bolts laying around here. Keep track of them. If you start banging on something and they fall onto the ground, like earlier on, I've already lost that one, you're going to be looking for it. Now at this point, I need the Allen bolts, or excuse me, the Allen wrench, and wherever my small 7/16. Of course, it's also spinning freely because of the smoked main belts. Remember, the primary purpose is replacing these main belts because they are smoked. Also converting the narrow edger. And at this point, I've got battery on, and I'm gonna that's about 18 inches up. Now I'll get the one size smaller Allen wrench than the last time. Oh yeah. At this point, I'm going to have to pause this. I'm going to have to go find a 16-penny nail, and I'm going to have to sharpen a spike into it and clean the holes out of these Allen bolts, because if I don't and I try to turn them, I'm going to strip them out. You must clean the holes of the Allen bolts out, or you have an extremely high risk of stripping them out. So I am pausing this now, and I'm going to find a very sharp thing to get the sawdust out of those Allen bolt holes. Okay, I got all the Allen bolt holes cleaned out, and now I'm able to remove bolts, because if I don't get the holes cleaned out, you can't get the Allen wrench into the hole. Don't want to strip those out. And pop loose. Don't lose the wrench. Nuts and bolts on this big saw. Got to be careful with these little nuts. They are Esnas or locking nuts, but they don't take much abuse and you can strip them out. They're basically just a safety on the, keeping the bolts into from coming out of the hole. See, I'm putting the wrench on here. I'm keeping the nut from going tight as I turn out the bolt, and then the bolt come out, where the nut comes off, then I can turn it out by hand. There's 8 of these little wonders. Pop with that tapered flange, they can get kind of tight. Sooner or later the blade comes loose. Despite never sees, they're still in there pretty darn good. The number of teeth on this blade, yes, your head is not messing with you. It is an 8-tooth blade that is normally intended for the electric version of the mill. And yes, your eyes are not deceiving you. This is a gasoline powered mill with an electric blade on it. Come on. Needless to say, it's a real good idea to take these nuts and bolts loose once a year and put some more never sees on them, or they can get really bad about not wanting to come out. Okay, find something else to do this. Okay, got the blade off. It was on the tight side, but it came off. Now take these things out. There's sawdust in it. That's just what you gotta do. Where'd my bolt go? Where'd my bolt go? Hey, there's my bolt. On, I got to adjust that into position with the blade. You can put some fresh paint on the top and bottom to help ballpark in the position of it. At this point, I need to release the edger. They're going to be a little bit tight, especially if you've gone a while without using it. Go up and down. I do this the hard way. The longer you go without using it, the tighter it's going to get. Anyway, the reason I'm doing this is because when you go to put this blade on, you need the blade down low enough. You want this blade, you don't want the teeth to be lined up perfectly parallel with them. You want to get it so that the teeth are in the halfway point, so you have the least amount of irregularity of the teeth in the cut at all times. there, but they're lined up pretty straight. Holes there. And I like that position. Stick that in there like that. That up. And that's roughed in. Now you can see this is still incredibly too low. Ballpark. See, this thing moves back and forth. And to do a blade adjustment for the angle, you take these two loose and you have this adjusting bolt here. Change the swing of the blade. There's maybe a flat difference in the adjustment between the two configurations. Don't over grease the bearings. That's basically what I'm saying. It's nice to be able to have the mill to go up and down to do this, because if you're all the way down turning these nuts and bolts and trying to get the sawdust out of the heads with the mill all the way down, a nail with a super sharp point is absolutely key in getting the sawdust out of the Allens so that you can get the Allen wrench into it. Never sees, if you're in any kind of a rainy environment at all, never sees on these bolts is absolutely key, or you are going to have a time and a half getting those bolts back out. Those are in. As you can see, over the years I've had to deal with a few mills that require me to hit on this thing with significant force to get this off. because of the lack of never-sees to keep things from rusting. And I mean significant force. There is a way with the engine off and the main blade to reach back in here and feel the edger belts to see how tight they are, but only with the engine off. Now, I'm going to have a multi-step adjustment here because I'm going to be replacing the mains. I'm going to have to go through a series of adjustments of releasing the tension on the input belt to the hydrostatic pump, which in turn, resetting that belt is going to require me to reset the tension on the output belt from the power steering, or hydrostatic pump. Why did I say power steering pump? Bleh. I guess they both deal in a fluid, so, you know, go figure. And I'm going to have to pull this bolt anyway. I'm going to get never-sees all over me, but, you know, this here, I talk about on many different videos about adjusting the angle of the main saw in the cut and adjusting the edger blades in the cut. This little Allen bolt here is what is adjusting the angle of the main belts, or the main blade in the cut. So you literally pull these two bolts loose and you adjust this. If you don't have long tools, it becomes a very serious major pain. I know historically mobile for set-in mills, they had an Allen wrench that would reach in from out here, and then 3/4 that would reach in from top and bottom, because otherwise if you have short tools, you're basically looking at removing the main guard and the main blade every time you're making an adjustment, and that starts taking hours upon hours. So now to pull this guard off. Yeah, gotta go up. There we go. Yes, you can expect to get never-sees all over you, because my arm is in the never-sees. I'm going to have never-sees on this coat for the rest of its life. It's just a fact of nature. It's just going to be the way it is. nice thing about the big edger, you got a bigger area to put your tools on than with this small edger. That just kind of goes with the territory. One more. This one, of course, holds the gas can up. Go figure. So we shall set it over there. That, and then use our imagination and take that off. You can get a better idea of how the edger belts run. You got a guide belt or roller here, and you got a guide roller here. About probably less than 30 running hours ago, I replaced the bearings on those. But you can see this is a pretty significant guide assembly to make sure that those belts making that 90-degree turn stay where they're supposed to stay. So point, give me some slack. You're gonna have to pull this to give me some slack in the belt, because yeah, we got the right ones here. Hydro mains. Have to, by hook or by crook, slide underneath. That slide on this shaft and slide through and under the edger belt to get onto the main pulley. Or option B is to pull the inside bearing on the main shaft and put the belts on from that side. Either way, I still have to release tension on this pump to be able to remove this belt to also get the belts on that end. It's a whole lot easier to cut the belts and take them off than it is to put them back on and make the thing work. A whole lot easier. So, just like wiring, it's easy to let the smoke out of the wires. Well, it's easy to let the smoke out of the belts too, but it's a hell of a lot of work to put the smoke back in the belts, just like wiring. So, what's that going to be? 3/4? Yeah, 3/4. Bolt is inside there. I may have to go get a long socket to put this back on and make sure it's tight. But with that removed, that's still just fine. Yeah, I'm starting to get never see is all over me. I wonder how that could happen. Problem. Okay, continuing on, we have decided to replace the eger belts as a match set. I will remove these belts, but I do not want to destroy the two that are still good, so I want to save those belts so that those two belts can be used as emergency spares if that were ever necessary. So now we get to dig a little bit farther into this. Yippee-ki-yay! We're just gonna have a grand time. Yay! Now, for some more encouragement. Something's a little bit rusty. You know? Well, now we're going back and forth real good. Hey, what do you know? Now this spins. You can figure out where the... Whoop! Don't take it above the hole. And it might not want to go back in the hole. Funny thing about that. Oh, come on. There we go. Good blade. You gonna stay up there? Be a good blade and stay there. Thank you. Half inch, 7/16. 9/16. If I would have been smart about this, I wouldn't have put this blade back on until I was done changing the edger bolts, but you win some, you lose some. Kind of falls back to when earlier I said you might put something together and then you figure out you got to put something else together, and you got to take that first thing you did back apart to do the thing that needed to be done, and then you wind up doing the first one more times than you care to admit to. Welcome to the world of tearing a sawmill apart and putting it back together 101. This is life. That should just go. That was uncomfortably tight. That. Hey, it's loose. Now, genius, would you? There it is. Socket on this front one, but you can't get a socket on that one because of the steel underneath it. I don't want to lose these special parts, so put them up there, and for the time being down. Oh yeah, more fun. First, that's gonna spin. So I need a 3/4. That gonna fit in there. Reverse. Like so. You can see this is so that you can, there's an angle on these two parts, so that you can set the angle of this roller to the edger belts to make sure they're doing what edger belts are supposed to do. Because, you know, that's just kind of important. And now that that's off from there, I should just pop right down off from there. Of course, there's some nice steel on the backside there. They can buy the steel. And we can crank this out some more. Now, remembering the one that's on the bottom here, that came off from the bottom of this pulley, not the top, the bottom, is the one on the far back on this pulley. Because reassembling these belts in the right order, it will muck with your head, drive you nuts. Just take this for reference. The one on the top goes to the outside here. The one on the bottom goes to the back. It will mess with your head so bad, it will drive you insane. So you have reference from this video to know the right way of doing this. And carrying on. Ah, metal is sharp. In case anybody didn't know that. Down off from there. Down there. I'm also going to stop at this point to continue ingraining into anybody that has to do these belts. These belts are on this shaft this way, and these belts are on this shaft this way. Get that imprinted in your brain, because if you don't remember that, this will drive you nuts. Voila! You can take the belts off without cutting them. There's the bad one. You can see the section that ripped out of there. That was from smoking the belts. From the damage. I'm sure something got done in there. Beat that to a pulp. So, I mean, you could try and run it, but I would be amazed if you got the 10 hours. Let's put it that way. These are the other two. I would call these serviceable. I think I'm aggressive. I'm going to need to back off on this roller. This roller was a little aggressive. Doesn't need to be touching that hard at all. So I'll need to make that adjustment. But you do not put the edger belts on first. You put on the main belts first. Yes. There's another guard I'm going to have to release. Install the mains. Gotta rev up the generator. Back out the engine. Always messing with something. Move one thing, something else wants to move. That is the input belt to the hydrostatic, so that has to come off to be able to get these belts up. Don't need to install belts per se. You just need to get the belts in there, because you still can't tighten those up, because you need to be able to get this to an angle to be able to get the edger belts on. Because without, if you just tighten this all back, you know, flip this around and tighten it up to the mains, and you don't have edger belts on, you don't have a sawmill. Well, you have a sawmill, but it's not going to do what it's supposed to do. So now edger belts. So, too long. One more. Oh, you just have to mess with me. Come on. Over and around. now that we can play jump rope, with this twisted, mangled, mind-warping. Remember, it was Yada. Remember that? Yeah, that's the way it was. Onto the pulley. This is where it can get to messing with your head. Really mess with a person's head. You have this roller. I may have done this backwards. I kid you not. It really messes with your head. That sure don't look like it's going to line up with that. Literally fall down. Get this bearing at that angle and have the belts. But as I said, I've said this over and over. Putting these belts on will mess with your head. roundy and I don't want it to. Sharp. Teeth are sharp. Come on. Come on. It won't wobble around so much and get me in so much trouble. Maybe it will cooperate a little better. So now the edger shaft is ballpark mounted. So lost some. I forgot that it was on generator power, and when the generator stalled out because I didn't have them revved up, it cut out on me, so unfortunately I lost some there. The idea is to not necessarily be touching the belts, but as a guide to make sure that the belts don't pop off. There's a lot of steps to this. I was a little bit stubborn to get off in there, so I'm going to put a little bit more on it. be a pretty technical, dry video, but it is what it is. I mean, this is the process. You either do this or it don't run. If you let the smoke out of your belts, you either do this or it don't run. So take your pick on that one. Getting better. You don't really want to lubricate the shaft that, you know, you've got all the sawdust in the world getting in there. And that will just help gum it up more, getting more sawdust on it. Okay, what's my next step? Eeny, meeny, miny, moe. More fun. Urgh. Our little nuts and bolts and doodads and this is the point where you find out if you put the belts on the wrong way, I guess, is if this guard won't go on, it is definitely a row, wait in a boo-boo. That goes in there. There's a bolt hole there. Go. Don't forget to put your rod on for the gas can. That's kind of an important thing. It's the magic juice that makes it go roundy roundy. Yeah, isn't that quite the same? Want to bet that this longer one might possibly two of them are the same length and one of them is longer. got that one. And you got that one. Okay. Suck up tight. Where in the world am I supposed to put that bolt? Where in the world am I supposed to find another bolt to put there? This is the same thickness. Washer in there. I don't have any extra. Oh, wait a second here. That sticks up 1.5 miles. That does basically. Okay. I figured out the mystery. I figured it out. I'm supposed to know these things before I start making the video, right? Sort of like, I got a jar of dirt, I got a jar of dirt, I got a jar of dirt, na 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 na. Okay, all this fun and effort I did of just putting that on there, now we get to take it right back off. That away so there's just a little bit of space there. Hopefully. Think I'm getting tired? Maybe, possibly, or is it that? Is it the over 40 effect? You start doing weird things at over 40, like holding something in your hand while you go walking around looking for it. Looking for your jar of dirt, walking around holding it in your hand, you know. Really special stuff. Big reason why I'm not using air is, you know, these are, some of these that I'm dealing with are 7/16, and, you know, using air tools on 7/16 is really easy to strip them out. Okay. Blade needs to be slightly flatter. So I should be able to adjust this one flat back that way. Release the lock. Actually, a matter of fact, where to go, there it is. Just a dab, just enough to get it on everything and make a thorough mess. Standing on top of it. I spend almost as much time, as you get tireder and tireder, you spend more and more time looking for the doggone nuts and bolts. Okay, we're to the point where we can go down. Okay, that's maxed down. We can look at it. It's so nice to be able to have multiple angles. We can pretend that's about right, right? Right. There's always more sawdust. got residue in here, leftover residue from the smoke belts. I mean, they were smoked. I mean, smoked as in the blade stalled in the cut and it melted the belts in two. I mean, smoked to the point of you are in danger of lighting this thing on fire. That is seriously smoked. Thankfully, that didn't happen. So I'm taking a wire brush to it to knock the garbage out of the grooves, because there's literally melted belt still in the grooves of the pulley. Better. If I don't rev that thing up. fine before I tore this apart, and now we are tight. Figured out why it was tight from yesterday. Went home, thought about it, and I've got a belt pinched in there, so now I need to release tension. Nice to have a spot behind it. Never seized. Belts are jammed in there. cargo pump. Okay, now that we got the belt straightened out, we'll put the bolts back in. Things to hang on to. It's going to get loud around here. Hopefully you can hear me. Can you hear me now? Then make less noise now. Side effects of being off-grid doing work. Because that's just a little clamp. Clamps onto the cable. And I got this down here. Bingo! Problem solved. Okay. The cable gets stuck in one end of this. Yeah. That's not going to fit through the hole. I have to do a little bit of more of custom modification to make this work. Alrighty. Maybe. Just maybe. Maybe if, oh, don't want to lose that. Don't want to lose that. I mean, that thing is little tiny. Come on. Come on. There we go. We're on. Hallelujah. Put this little thing back in there. correctly. Yeah, that other hole is bigger. So I don't need to worry about a problem on the other end, or at least I shouldn't. Oh shit. You gotta put the thing through the hole before you attach the cable to it. So I get to take this whole thing back apart. Unfortunately. Stick that through. Put that in there like so. Tighten it down. Didn't I say way back at the beginning of this, by the time you do something, you gotta tear it back apart because you gotta do something else before you do the other thing? That is one of those things. That's tight. And this runs up somewhere. There's a hole there. A hole there. Goes there. There. You want this like so when it's in the forward position, and then if I artificially hold this, it lifts pushback arm, so when it's going that way, it lifts the pushback arm, and you go into reverse, it lowers the pushback arm. Don't really need to get, 500 foot-pounds of torque on this thing, but you also don't want it to come loose. Now there's definitely some excess there. I could probably good bit shorter, but it is what it is. So now that repair, because that was also broken and needed to be replaced. Now, walk back on. Well, I gotta rev this thing up. Run it back in. Not a very big air compressor. Okay, thank you. I can rev them down. Now that I got the mains where I want them, I need to make sure the governor alternator is reasonably tight. If there's ever a belt to replace before it needs to be replaced, it is this belt. You lose this belt, you lose control of the RPMs of your engine. So if you don't feel comfortable running this belt, you change it. Because if it runs away and you don't have a way of getting the engine shut off, you're gonna blow it up. It's gonna go for the moon, and when the short block goes, the connecting rods, it's just gonna go. That governor is there for a reason. So definitely always have a governor alternator belt on hand in case you ever feel the need to change it because you're thinking it's getting a little bit frayed or something. It's not a belt to be pushing excessive life out of, so be aware of that. Now I've got the pump loose. And I need to tension the pump. Make sure you're watching this, because as you tighten that, to tighten this belt up, this belt will also get tight, so you want to make sure you don't overstretch this one by getting the tension on this one correct. after loosening this one up. This one's plenty tight. I would even prefer it to get a little looser, but still pretty tight. It's only April and I got hornets flying around me. Yay, it's going to be a great summer with hornets all over the place. That's got a little bit of give to it. Okay. Now the next step is actually, you've got a lock nut in here, and that lock nut on the adjuster needs to be tightened back. And that's tight. You got 2 bolts that hold the hydrostatic unit to the carriage frame. You need to retighten those. See that you could do this without taking the main blade off, but it would be very difficult. Okay, belts are finished. So, I'm waiting on him to modify the moving edger guard for the main. I will put my blow nozzle on and remove some sawdust to keep this show going. Well, I'm just going through here and making sure this is nicely lubricated with never sees, so that I don't have to deal with a pain in the butt the next time it comes off. once you deal with one of these things having seize-up problems, you learn that a bottle that never seizes is a really cheap thing. So until I get the collars and the blade, I'm pretty much out of things to do, because once I get the blades and the cover, main guard cover, gas tank back in place, I will do a test cut to verify that the blades are still in alignment, just as a general double check to make sure, because you know, you've had this thing completely taken apart, there's always the chance that it accidentally moved a fraction of a flat. I mean, one flat of adjustment on this adjusting bolt can take the blades completely out of whack, or really close to it. So other than me blowing more sawdust out of this thing, I guess I just can shut the camera off, because I've already shown blowing some sawdust. It's kind of a generic thing, so hold tight. Okay, now we assemble the blade. Got a little bit of never seize on the collars, help with rust. The one with the pin always goes on the inside. The blade goes on with the pin of that collar into the blade, and this collar always goes on the outside. Don't drop your nut. This goes on this side. If it was wide edger, it would go on the other side to make the difference in the 4-inch spacing. And the nut goes on here. And then at this point, you need to, because now I have belts that are holding it, I can use that bolt to keep it from turning, and with some encouragement, you want this bolt, this nut, tight. You don't want it partially tight, you want it tight to the point it stops turning. It's tight. You do not half bake the tightness of that bolt. You want that bolt tight. I keep saying bolt, I mean nut. Now that this is on, your blade guide can swing around. And I'm done carrying a sharp object so I can have the gloves off. Slide it back up. Put that on there. Half inch, half inch, half inch. Need 7/16. I'm also double checking here that the guide on the inside is slightly away from the blade, and it is not. So I need to make an adjustment to that as well. By having the tooth socket there. 1/2 inch. I can slide in the moving edger. It is not 1/2 inch, it is 7/16. Main blade guard. On the little post in the back. Slide into the slot for the moving edger. Down here that's been laying there since basically the beginning. It goes in there. On this one. For the top bolt here, it's 1/2 inch. And the next step is the spring. Be able to put the mill into neutral. It helps if you're not squishing the gas can. Be able to hook that on there.
They're separated, aren't they?
They're separated. Well, maybe I can hook it on before, but I need to get it to a point where it'll go onto the mouth. So, pull the spring up, hook it onto there, and we're in place. Take it back out of neutral, so it's always in gear, so you don't forget about that. And I'm running out of stuff to do. So now is the elephant trunk, as I call it. Goes on there. I don't know where the bolt went to. won't fit through the hole, so that won't work. So just have to make believe for the moment, for the time. Next step takes a 9/16, and I'm gonna get that part. In like that. I gotta remember where I hit with the wrench. And come down here. Tighten it up. You can put it closer to the saw. That's kind of personal preference. People like it in different spots. I like more flexibility bringing the board off from the mill, but that's up to each individual person how they do that. I will pick all this stuff up and move it over here. Let's see here. I'm kind of doing a once over as I walk around and take the battery charger off and make sure everything's tight. And I'm not seeing anything that's loose. We shall attempt a test fire. One thing, there's a guard on the belts to the main shaft, and I don't have it put up where it needs to be. It's catching on the frame of the track, and that was what was stopping it from going to forward. So that's on the other side here, and I'll get that tight. Okay, now that I have that guard back on, we'll do another test fire. And there you have it. That's how you change a set of belts. Hopefully this video comes out good, because I am literally stuck running those generators in the background. Thanks for watching, and until next time, see you then.